To continue, we're going to open the panel where we speak about topics linked to happiness of the human being, the leadership integrational techniques, innovative, and the role of incidental. Then we're going to ask Mr. Mayor Steinhardt, who's going to moderate this next panel. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Deeply touched. Very special. Very special. That is ours. Our experts panel in education. We have the honor to invite Dr. Francisco Jimenez Bautista, Institute of Peace and Conflict, Universities in City of Granada. Then we have Dr. Santiago Castellan, Professor of International Law at the Rovira Virgil University, International URV Relations, and Director of the Master's Program in International Criminal Justice in Spain. And then we follow with Dr. Margarita Arellano, Associate Vice President and Dean of Students of the University of Texas, Texas State, United States. And then last, Dr. Jose Inocente Moreno Cámara, Vice Minister of Design and of Educational Quality Verification of the Ministry of Education in Guatemala. Well, we initiate then with Dr. Francisco Jimenez Bautista, Department of Social Anthropology, Institute of Peace and Conflicts, Granada University, Spain. His curriculum of research and teaching, Jimenez Bautista, has developed in the interdisciplinary sphere that covers education and anthropology. He has 3 lines of research: ecological geography, cultural conflicts, racism, and migrations, investigations over peace and conflicts. And then last, the first experiences in research of Jimenez Bautista, they took place in the Institute of Peace and Conflicts of College University, Granada, being a founder member of the Peace and Conflicts. Since 1997 up to present, we ask you to be up here. Thank you, especially for the invitation to the Global Embassy of Activists for Peace, to Director Gabriela Lara. It's a pleasure for being for first time in Guatemala. I've been working in Latin America more than 20 years. and I know perfectly how the Latin Americans work and think by my profession of professor and educator. Even though I especially work in countries with more conflicts like Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, and Brazil, you looks like behave a little bit better. And then let's see what's going to happen. Since 1988, one day having a coffee with Johann Galton, I was impressed by the way of think and act of that old man that's still giving conferences with 84 years old. He has more than 1,600 publishings if one wants to work. And really, since then, I am an activist of peace. I am maybe the first professor of Spain of studies of peace in anthropology. So, therefore, I can work the barriers with the academy and make this profile of the academy so we can be perfectly. I will be the third professor of studies of peace for the university, the College Granada University, and then some appreciations that I want to do in this debate. According to that debate, I'm going to start with the conference. The importance of Erasmus. Latin America should invent an Erasmus. They should learn to interact with more countries. The Erasmus has done that all the Europeans start knowing. That is the experience from translating from one place to another one to have a title given by a European college. So they allow them to work in 27 countries. Imagine the importance to work in a space that wide. That should be done here in Latin America. There is a second note. There's the rejection to egocentrism. And then Europe has all that virtues, but let's see if they're capable to open those spaces that can help us to work. Science is nothing else but to use scientific method. So it's not very complex to assume and accept, or do science or do literature. So we have to understand that. That is the idea. That is the. They receive a critic from many intellectuals because the first thing they do is to the professors are going to be evaluated. The professor, he doesn't like to be evaluated. It's good that we get evaluated, and then that we have to put the time. We cannot accept in the university of any world one that does not publish. This ends. Simple as that. This that the friend we are going to start to break it. The last example, we're thinking Latin America, Colombia a few years ago, 5,000 teams of research. Well, they stop 2,500. Where you are people who does not publish the principles, they start fighting each other. In Ecuador, they closed 17 universities because they didn't have the scientific quality. We need to start thinking to close universities for those places where they don't have the quality of the scientific level. If we need to have some rules, we can compare among us, but we compare it with scientific criteria. So we have to transmit little by little certain reality. I'm coming from a university that before it was created in 1531, so has 5 centuries. We have a form, a character, distinct of behavior. We really print the way of understanding, but now they are giving away registration to the students to the value of 5 quetzales. The doctorate course in our University Granada is 50 quetzales. So it's about 500 quetzales. We don't pay the 80 or 90 millions of pesos that they pay in Bogota. So just imagine the importance that means to be peace politics from my university. This is the title that they give me. I'm going to try to see if we can try. Let's see. I work with a good faith. I am a man of academic man, so I would like always to live precision. Everybody is speaking about peace, In Latin America, everybody speak about peace, but I don't know. I don't think they know what peace means. So I show you my cartography of peace. I show you my map that I've been working the last 25 years, and let's see if I'm capable to create a model of research and education for peace. Well, peace is a fashion. Everybody's speaking about peace, and that's enthusiastic. But peace means some disciplinary elements and interdisciplinary, then intradisciplinary elements when we talk about that scientific approach. Then I speak about peace in a simple way. The peace is anything that is non-violent. I defined that many years ago, and then peace is written with non-violence, the non-violence with a line, and then that means three different things in function of the different ways of violence, structural violence, cultural violence. So that's how we have a philosophic idea of peace. A few years ago, I have retouched that concept. Now, peace means an idea of resilience by sustainability, conflict by vulnerability, in a positive aspect or negative aspect. So a human being can grow from the ashes. We've seen that before. That this lady is a resilient person. There are people that they sink for any little problem, but there are person that grow up with adversities. So that is the concept that I'm actually working on. Is the concept of build that reality. It's a whole process that we are building from a negative piece that goes over the nonviolence and then goes over the structure piece, and then you might think about the leftists. But what I want is to continue a little bit the work that the master has been doing from cultural violence and symbolic violence. Well, that was in 1990, and symbolic violence, it was in 1977. I built the concept of neutral peace. The neutral peace is neutralized ways of violence, ways of cultural violence and symbolic violence that legitimate the other ways of violence, direct violence, and then we use that verb to neutralize. The verbs are active, not adjectives. To be neutral, we are not neutrals. We are not neutral. Otherwise, we won't be here. Just as simple as that. Then that's a simple exercise we have to do. We need to change to do a Pacific paradigm to go to that concept of peace world that we should be working on. And this was cartography. We have a cartography of three types of peace. That comes there. It's the synthesis of 20 years of work. So people might think that that can be done in 2 days, and that's backed up by a lot of work. So somebody wants to be entertained, can be reading the next month. The negative peace. Those are the four ways of peace: direct violence, cultural violence, symbolic violence, and then I just build the hybrid violence that even in the newspapers is about to come out like a kind of that's summarizing of the three violence, and then the violence adopts own attitude. This is a negative peace, positive peace, neutral peace, social peace, something that's happening in Europe. I am working in a concept. You speak about Mother Earth. I speak about daily peace. The hypothesis that they're saying, the concept of ecological peace. You go to internet, then you put ecological peace, and comes an article of a few pages to so can understand. The internal peace comes from the east. Then in the societies where the culture, we can work on those pieces, and then in the fourth generation of pieces, we use three words of sustainable. I teach anthropology. I am something that meets ecology with peace. A long time ago, you used the word of that vulnerable peace. The sustainable peace is worked on the University of New York. People like Coleman, Free, Massaro, they use that word. And the resilient peace that we are now building, really. Truly build it. We are building a cartography, a map of concepts that help us to, so we can work in a proper way. We need concepts. the feminist movement, it will be right if the word gender is not invented. That word builds a whole new thing. We need new concepts that so we can implement the complex realities in which we live. That is a lot of possibilities that will take us to that idea of a culture of peace, human rights to peace, and then peace in the world. So the people has the right to live in peace, and the politicians are committed to do that exercise. Just look at two couple of things. The resilient peace. What do we have? Inequality, margination, impunity. How do we get out of that world of injustice to see how it's really built? Well, we can see those conflicts solved. What is going on in Latin America? Latin America, her daily life is changing the theory for peace. Now, what is the conflict generated? Well, the peace is learned, the violence is learned. Well, what happened in Latin America is that the violence is naturalized. They kill the people, and then the people, it's very quiet. But a lot of homicides in Mexico, more than 40,000. In Colombia, more than 12,000, and many times everybody says, this is the eternal spring. That's a lie. It's not the eternal spring. This is the best weather of the world. I don't know why you being stuck in that. That's not truth. Because I have been traveling throughout 25 worlds. I don't know why you have that the eternal spring in countries where that you really are traveling. There is a lot of vulnerability. I'm really working in the hybrid peace that is supposed to overcome the conflict, eliminating that when we justify that, what are we doing? We justifying some violent actions. Simple as that. And then we have those ways of culture, that naturalization of the culture as something very normal that it should be called our attention. Why a cartography? Well, those are concepts of peace. We need a map. We need to write a map. We need tools, political, methodological tools in a certain measure, something with values and socio-political tools. We need a cartography of pieces as a collective process, participative. And we need ideas that help us to link some feelings, emotions, experiences, and above all, knowledge that identify which are very important. What is the neutral piece? Well, we're going to speak about one to see how that works. The elimination of cultural violence. Then violence means what we need to look at is the transcendence of this. How do we legitimize certain situations? How do we legitimize that? The structural piece. How do we spend some money in certain things and nobody says nothing? Why some physical violence and well, the feminist side, which is there's another way to call it because some is direct violence in a way. We call it a ways of violence, but also the creative transformation of conflicts that help us many times to understand that reality. We understand a cosmovision of that piece. We're going to see the techniques of the non-violence too, so we can work in the classroom, and then it's going to be some centers that are not allow us to organize where we can build a peace and then the people take conscience of the techniques required. Well, to work in the neutral peace is a process of teaching since the critic. We are very, we're not comfortable when nobody makes a critic or somebody pursues. Well, people doesn't know that there is not a file or to me, usually they kick me out of the places because I have to go and speak with the people. It's not very good. So because we do that, educate for neutral peace implies those concepts of neutral peace, of world peace, and then the conflict is neutral. There is no crisis, there is no alternative. The conflict is there and we have to face it. We have to have the courage to solve it in a positive way. And then the idea of the human rights, the idea of how it's built, the construction of peace. The document is, I have given to CUMIPAZ so they can use it. But you also can find it on the internet. How do we reduce the ways of violence? How do we show up with a neutral acknowledgement of this? Well, they pay us to teach, to educate people. They don't pay us to really create people with a concrete ideology in function of our interests, and especially a neutral language. How is the concept comes out, what is used for, how is built, how to show it, and how to eliminate the demagogy, the non-violence, and the uh, pacific resolution of conflicts, the constructive dialogues. This is a change that we have to do. Everybody's speaking about a culture of peace. They speak about dialogue and neutral peace. And then they speak about human rights. We have to invert the order. It should be a way of a dialogue and some education to build scenarios where the culture of peace can be developed. This is synthesized in two bigs. One is in Ecuador, in Loja, and the first one to know Pacific. So that's good to read for the law students. A lawyer cannot see a business just you cannot see a person and see $500. You have the capacity to make reflect that person, that has to rectify, it has to be good, it has to go to his house, because if not, he's going to have a lot of trouble. Then the other is Pacific Rationality, which is in Madrid in the Dickinson publisher, where they can have the collection of peace and conflicts of Dickinson. There are about 8 books, and then it's a book of education over peace in Barranquilla. So where we can see where can we work in the matters about violence. Well, as we can see, many books, textbooks, well, they're not neutral. It doesn't exist that neutrality. Well, therefore, we're going to work for something that is not, it doesn't exist. There is some hierarchy in which is designed to teach to the people. Among education for peace, there are 4 that have been defined by this Jesus Maris. I work in the last phase, that is education for neutral peace. So we can start introducing elements, different elements. What we need to do is to put the agendas from the UNESCO, the agendas from the UN within our debates. Why the school doesn't solve problems on its own context? Why they write a lot of dumb things? Well, just to put an example, many students they speaking about Mafalda. Mafalda is very important, but not to give the life of a human being. The anthropologists are studying a lot the silence. Just imagine 350 pages about the topic of the silence. The people has been lazy with things that has not use for them. The scheme of the neutral peace, you can visualize it here. Peace is something utopic. Happiness is utopic. Neutral peace works with 3 elements: dialogue, education, and research. Who does not do research must not be in university. That then I prepare the classes very good. It's good. But, that's good for its house, but you need to have the ability to make these things. How can neutral speak about neutral peace? And that's the effort that we need to do. Thank you very much for your attention, and we're open to any question.
Very, very good. We'll reach now to Dr. Santiago Castella. He will speak to us on the role of the actors, social actors, that inside in the education process for the implementation for education for the peace and the formation of transformational leaders. And a little about, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Santiago Castella. He's professor of international law from the Rovira University, member of the Spanish Association of Rectors, and for international affairs since 1995. He's also a member to the Faculty of Juridical Sciences, member founder of the group of Tarragona, director of the professorship for Tarragona's SMAT. He was part of the promoter group of the Permanent Euro-Mediterranean of Universities and director of postgrad specialist in international cooperations from the Foundation 11 from Rovira Virgil University since 2009 until now. He's a doctor in law, graduate from Barcelona University, political science from UNEB. He made a magister in peace, security, and defense from the General Gutierrez Mellado from Spain and UNEB. Let us receive him now. Good afternoon. Thanks to CUMIPAZ for inviting me again for this edition. I'm going to try to do some contributions. You have already seen that the title was so long that it was almost unreadable. If we had to summarize it, it would have to be educating in the era of the post-humanism. And I'm going to try to do some reflections on the radical changes that the world is going through and the necessity of recovering an integral education in values that can give answers to the necessities of construction for the human being itself. 170 years ago, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels were publishing in London the Communist Manifest that was it would start with these words: "A ghost goes through Europe." In his case, he was referring to the spectrum, to the ghost of the communism. And I think it's suitable to start by wondering, what is the ghost that goes through the world today? If you allowed me, what is the ghost that takes the globalization today? I think many of you would agree with me in giving as an answer and condensely saying that this ghost is the fear, uncertainty, and in the political expression, the new populisms, or in the religious expression, the integrisms, the fear as a mother to retract us to a traditional model reinvented, and if you would, refibble in which few maintain their model of domination and exploitation over many, taking advantage of a conspirationally story, but above all, exploding over many, taking the dissolution of the societies and the dissolution of the dignity of human person, and of inflicting terror to lose the false assurances of the consumerist model. As I will try to explain, the reality of a global world where the changes accelerate rapidly creates the illusion of being in front of an abyss and calls us to hold on tight to the false certainties of our reality. In a few years, the pole of tension between conservatism and progressivisms, if you prefer, between tradition and innovation, or said in a more classical way, between right and left, has faded, has lost its ability to explain the political reality in Europe and in the world. The Anglo-Saxon theorists and the third way already practiced by theorizing the appearance of what they call a new radicalism, mainly in the work entitled Beyond the Left and the Right, The Future of Radical Policies by Anthony Giddens, in which the adoption of the radicalism by conservatism was advancing while the social democracy was locked in the precarious trenches of defense of some minimums of the welfare state achieved until the end of the 80s. Anthony Giddens anticipated some profound changes and numerous symptoms of this reality and creates a concrete when he put the accent in the idea of knowledge, the known, the learning, and the changes that were coming. Well, there's no, I think, no relationship is that is so close, imbricated, and so consistent with the idea of illustration as the one presented on the emancipating progress of the humanity and the idea of the conquest of the knowledge of wisdom. Anthony Giddens affirms that illustration left us as a legacy the conviction that the more knowledge, the mastery of the medium is more. In a certain way, he presented the history as the advance of man's domination over nature through rational and scientific knowledge, where knowledge gave us emancipation, freedom, opportunities, and above all, certainties. The liquidity described by Bowman of the modern era breaks in a certain way with this idea. Today, knowledge is not necessarily certainty, and therefore necessarily freedom and progress of humanity. The accelerated technological advances transform reality today, creating ethical, political, and conceptual uncertainties that we have to address urgently. There are authors who already talk about post or transhumanism, the capacity to prolong, and there are even those that dare to say our life is infinite, the ability to overcome the disease by turning agent not into a natural process but into a pathology divisible, the possibility of freeing ourselves from work as we know it today through robotics, the combination of our intelligence with artificial intelligences that expand our memory, the permanent connection between objects through the Internet of Things, and the massive accumulation of data known as big data, which allow us to find unimaginable solutions. As director of a smart city chair at my university, I have had the opportunity to reflect with multiple experts on the radical nature of the changes that lie ahead. In a way, big data totally changes our paradigm of knowledge. Because until now, we could ask to the few data that we had and that we had obtained in a complex and dedicated way a few things. Instead, now in the era of online information, we can instantly access in a few thousands of seconds a huge amount of real information which allows us to think that any question can be answered. For the first time in history, we can get accurate, scientific, rational, and satisfactory answers to any question. And therefore, we can start imagining new questions. To give you an example, when today a mass activity is held, for example, a concert or a music festival, we can ask ourselves questions about where the audience was coming from because we know where the mobiles, the smartphones of the attendees usually sleep. We can ask ourselves how they got to the place of the concert, yes, in public or private transport, by plane, by train, by car, because we know the road that the smartphone has made connecting to different tenants until arriving to the place of the concert. We can ask ourselves where they have dined, in what areas of the city they have gone to dinner because we know where their cell phone has been standing for more than 3 hours in an hour in a certain time slot. But we can ask much more things if the concert attendees have attended the last years to other cultural activities and to which, or if they buy in the market or on the supermarket, or in what proportion, and if their friends, that is the mobiles of those who receive more calls, have gone to cultural activities, participated in political demonstrations, or what are their leisure areas on holidays. This is just a very small, and believe me when I mean a very small, example of the multiple possibilities that big data gives, exponentially increased arithmetically with the possibilities of the Internet of Things. And they are only a small example of the changes that are approaching in all areas, in public policies, but also in private ethical construction. Advances in nanotechnology, biotechnology, robotics, the digital transition of our entire living space bring about radical changes in human condition. Fernando Sabater, one of the greatest Spanish philosophers, often controversial for his political positions, has an excellent informative book entitled The Questions of Life, whose first substantial chapter is entitled death to start, where he puts. We are in an age in which where we need to rethink over, maybe like never before, the human condition. Giddens, when he speaks ceasing to offer certainties, he coined that concept, the fabricated risk, and he cites climate changes as the example where more knowledge has broadened our perception of risk and not necessarily our ability to control the environment or answer to the rest. So this is what I want to talk about today, of this ghost that goes through the world, that we could call it as the fundamentalism and populism and communitarianism, as opposed to the other axis of the balances that will be the cosmopolitan liberalisms. Today, a ghost travels the world with an unusual force, with verses renewed with messages that might seem contradictory and segmented to different audiences, but has as a common link the recovery and a post-traditional order, which is claimed in particular of the ethnic and national identities to draw in some insurmountable differences, privileges, and exclusions among those who have freely decided to live together. I insist that the faces and the forms are diverse, sometimes as pro-independence nationalisms that seek to break with the state, in others as a political and social projects of exclusion of immigrants, and sometimes as religious evangelizing proposals of reconciliation with transcendent assurances, in occasions like collective empowerment alternatives of clear anti-liberal sign, sometimes with epic forms of post-abundance of reconciliation with nature. But in all of them, we can identify a common element, a clear anti-individualism. For them, modernity is market consumerism, alignment, perversion, when even Satanism, Judeo-Messianism, or any other intellectual perversion. They are based on a widespread idea, the conviction that identities are something natural, nothing more false. Identities, what creates the illusion of being identical or that identifies us with others closer, as science has shown in social builder. They are a conscious and thought process that allows us to be more supportive to those closest to us, to protect us from the unknown, from the other, from the one that is not ours, and to allow a logical transmission of ethical intangibles and collectible imaginaries. We build identities to protect ourselves, to close ourselves, if you please, to hide, to surround us, but we cannot think at all that these identities are given by nature. The end of 20th century has meant a brutal break with the existing traditional order. This liquid society, Bowman explains, mainly means the need to self-build above those identities that were advocated as natural and immutable, to enter a space of multiple identities, diverse, sometimes even contradictory, changing, changeable, and adaptable to a world and a dynamic global social relations. If we were to think about it, our grandparents were born with a rather closely identity package. They had the religion of the state where they were born, Protestants in Finland, Catholics in Spain or Italy, or Orthodox in Greece or in Russia, and Islamists in Morocco and Arabia, or perhaps Leop or freethinkers in France and Belgium. They had a unique national identity marked by their passport. They had a sexual identity marked exclusively by their genitality. They were men or women. They worked on what their parents had worked on, or in the best of the cases, on what they had studied. And they were locked in the social class of which they became aware and defended or transgressed. Well, nowadays, no one inherits the work of their parents. Few jobs last more than a decade, and almost nobody, works on what they study. It is even difficult to say in many cases. It's difficult to explain in many cases what our profession is. The professional identity or work already defines us a little. The social classes have faded. Not only a great ascending and descending mobility is appearing, but mainly a loss of class consciousness and its belonging to it. Sexual identities have multiplied almost, and no one explained by its strict framework of its genius or not the erotic experiences, and sometimes effective and articulate through his life. The national identities are nowadays based on a general patriot. In fact, the national feelings in few occasions transcend beyond the international championships of soccer. Religious identities have also become blurred. In a search of a collage of religions, where not following the ethical mandates of your religion does not cause any contradiction. There are Catholics who declare not believing in God or not believing in eternal life, but above all, non-practicing Catholics who does not follow the precepts of their church on sexuality. And we could continue today. Identities today are free, chosen, changing, and contradictory, and that is good. It is very good. The human being frees himself from the slavery imposed by belonging to the group, and with an unusual capacity, cosmopolitan and open to travel, change residence, settle down to live at the same time in many places, build who they want to be. The overcoming of close identities of the identity packages that were socially imposed in a restrictive way to maintain traditional forms of domination today are overcome by a humanity that is compelled to freedom, compelled to personal self-construction, called insistently to be built permanently, to decide which are the identities that explain that new and different I every day. However, we were destined to build ourselves as human beings. We are called upon to decide who we want to be, forced to decide how we will develop, but then the fear of emptiness, the abyssal anguish appears, and we easily run to take refuge in artificial identities that we consider safe. A false and reinvented traditional order arises, which seeks to maintain the traditional forms of domination and exploitation, keeping the human being in a permanent minority state. Im- Immigrant children of North Africa of third and fourth generations who had no who had not had contact with their religion and articulate their construction of identities, reverting to an imaginary false Islam, which gives them an argument against societies from the West, in which they have been scarcely embraced and in which they carry a burden of inherited humiliation, and not knowing how to read the Quran, not knowing how to understand beyond the discourse of the chosen as martyr, having seen the videos of Al Qaeda of the Islamic State decide the path of the terrorism, while it liberates them from the school failure, economic difficulties and affected uncertainties, having to fight for themselves in a world complex and dehumanized. They make of fear the engine of a process that should be marked by liberty. During over 30 centuries at least, human beings, we have fought to conquer territories. The territory was power. They were riches. It was the work for their people, and therefore the equation was easier to generate a territory, greater wealth. Today, the reality has changed radically. Little explains the territorial possession. A new space without territory is born. It's called let's call it what we want is the network, the cloud, the internet, cyberspace, a space without physical territory, and an unlimited space where it is not necessary to fight to be, and where we can be in as many forms and ways as we can. There are some philosophers who speak as digital Zionism of the construction of Netherlands and virtual communities to which they owe greater loyalty than to their social or national communities than to their the cyberspace with its already called Facebook nations or networked communities allows a power relationship where this is not a scarce good, and therefore each group can build its own power relationships. The great danger is that they can and have already appeared groups that are self-excluded, closed, that stop participating in the global and ethical debate to give its members exclusive self-references, fundamentalists and totalizers, where it is impossible to interact with other groups. Reason ceases to be a universal language, and we see a fragmented globalization, which for the first time in the history breaks with the universalists' pretensions. Europe, with the construction of the Germanic Roman Empire, already saw how the House of Austria had in the middle of the Middle Ages as a symbol the AEIOU. The acronym of Austria is the Imperium of Orb, and the Universum. Today, for the first time, universalism can be seen fractured by self satisfied closed discourses that transmit inside dogmatic slogans that carry the germ of hatred, exclusion, while preventing the free development of personality of the human being. As expected, freedom brings fear. There is a proverb that says suitably, beware of the fears that come at night and steal your dreams. Well, I finish now. As already understood by the School of Salamanca of the Jewish theologians more than 5 centuries ago, the world is a dream of fraternity on the basis of the natural sociability of the human being. Well, this dreamed world capable of embodying the enlightened values, this pure ethical world, the best contribution to the construction of a universal world, this world mother of this democracy, the science, the reason, the human rights, is today in danger. The advance with attractive, renewed, and suggestive faces of the old traditional order that resists to be overthrown with new forms but always linked to the identity, with faces of attractive nationalisms, with vindications of the sovereignty of the people against the legal order, with appeals that the polls are above the law, with referendum models, with the abusive occupation of public space, with the perverse use of the media, with the false truth and the truths only for us and the false for the rest. Whether it's Donald Trump, Marianne Le Pen, Putin, or Maduro, they put in danger the construction of a fraternal war. The recipes to combat it are tremendously complex. There's surely not a unique recipe beyond what our precursors did. The pedagogy, education is the only possible answer. We must rethink education to train free people, courageous before the change, leaders of the construction of their identities, committed from the heart, with a peace based on respect for the dignity of each of their fellow humans, being human beings and in harmonious relationship with the planet. The transformational leaders who know that the revolution takes place from within us, and from there in the construction of a better and freer world, equal in opportunities and fraternally united with all its inhabitants and with the Mother Earth. In 1992, Bill Clinton defeated George Bush, the father, with a medical phrase, "I- it's the economy, stupid." Well, today we say, it's not the economy, neither the trade, nor the security, nor the demography, nor the technoscience. It's education, stupid. Thanks.
Well, very good, very good. It's education. Well, Dr. Santiago Castella, so who will be tomorrow in the political session, and what he said, we will see. Then we are with Dr. Margarita Arellano, Vice President Associate of Texas State University. She will give us educational tendencies and innovations for life. And then so we can understand of this structure, where we'll see is Associated President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students Affairs in Texas State. Besides to supervise the Dean Office of Students, supervise the Campus Recreation Department, the LBJ Student Center, and the Department of Housing and Residential Life. These are four areas with strong programmatic student development component that are very important in the curricular experience of the students. Throughout her professional career, Margarita Arellano has earned the respect of students, faculty, and staff due to her ethical leadership, spirit of collaboration, commitment to excellence, care, and dedication to students, and the educational mission of the students, higher education institutions. Listen where this comes from. She's going to explain you better than myself.
Good afternoon. I was looking at the time when I'm going to start because I'm going to try to keep it under 20 minutes. I would like to start with telling you, first of all, I'd like to thank the Global Embassy of Activists for Peace for inviting me to speak at CUMIPAZ to Dr. Soto, and I hope that he gets well soon. And to Ms. Gabriela Lara, thank you for your invitation. Also to Mr. Enrique Garcia, because he was the person who called me and who kept me up to date as far as the great team that this organization has, the number of volunteers, the number of people who I met even before I came here. It really says a lot about this organization. Thank you. I would also like to thank all of the people who were invited to this event, and thank you for giving me 20 minutes of your time. I appreciate it so much, and I don't ever take it for granted or take it as people will want to come see me. I also want to say I'm sorry, and that's because I'm from Nicaragua, and I've lived in the US for 40 years. And of course, I've been speaking English for 40 years, and generally I speak 90% English in the day, and just 10% of the day I speak Spanish with my family. So when I was making this presentation, I was debating should I say it in speak in English or in Spanish, because when I left, the language evolutionizes, and I didn't realize that until I was here and I was going to give this presentation, and I said, wow, all the words that exist that I didn't know about. And I'm going to give you a tour of the past for 30 seconds. How many of you remember what a mimeographo was? Raise your hand. Do you remember that? How many of you remember what stencils were? Well, those were the words that I knew. Printer? I didn't know what printer was until 2 years ago in Spanish. Impresora. The the languages change. So I want to say I'm sorry if I forget a moment, a word, because I decided to do it in Spanish because I think that I'm gonna have the audience more united with me if I do it in Spanish. My topic is going to be innovative tendencies in education, and I want to say something else. I am very used to the fact that part of what I do is to take risks. And a risk that I took is that this presentation is uh, going to be more personal. I'm going to mix my narrative into it. I'm going to mix my personal and my professional life to speak about what I think the paradigms of education are. I think we're going to learn more if we know where I'm coming from, my story. And I spoke about it before. I am originally from Nicaragua, and I am very proud to be a Central American sister of yours, and to be a Latin American sister of yours, and to be with all of you here. Thank you. I was born to a very poor couple who loved their children immensely, and they didn't have a big long education. My mother only had a sixth grade education, and my father had an eighth grade education. But they always had a goal, and that was to educate us, their children, to educate us. And many interesting things happened in our lives. One of them was that my father, despite not being very educated, he became a famous a bit of a famous soccer player in Nicaragua at a young age. Imagine, soccer player. So that's exactly why my father, they was given a scholarship. It was a scholarship to get a bachelor's degree, short studies at the University of Piedras in Puerto Rico. And that is how my father, when he uh, when he traveled, the world was open to him. The world is open to us based on our experiences, and there are experiences that really impact us. And traveling and knowing, getting to know other cultures, is something very important. And my father, of course, when he was in Puerto Rico, which is a country that I really love, and I took my mother there because my father always promised her that he would, and so I took him after my father died. And in Puerto Rico, he was lucky enough to be able to travel to the United States from Puerto Rico because there were some Pan American games. So he was able to experience a bit of the United States, and he lived and he saw discrimination. He saw other things that he learned from. When he came back from the United States to Puerto Rico and then to Nicaragua, he returned with a mission to educate and to start with the education of his own children. And we were very young, but he worked very hard. He had 3 jobs to pay for our studies. I went to a Catholic school that I chose. It was for women, and that was the best women's education institute in Guatemala, St. Teresa's Academy. If you don't know about St. Teresa, well, she is the first doctor of the church. She was a woman who believed in the concept of school, that you educate a man and you educate a man, but you educate a woman and you educate a generation. So, of course, this school was a bit feminist. And I was very okay with that. As I said, my dad worked very hard. He had 3 jobs. One of them was I didn't understand. He would stay up very late uh, with some negatives, pictures, and he did what Photoshop does now. You know what Photoshop does? Makes our eyes look bigger, make our hair look better. That's what he used to do at night. And then he had other photography jobs. He did everything he could. My poor father. So as I said, he didn't have much of an education. He was also a trainer for the national soccer selection. So he always told us, I'm going to break the cycle of poverty. The cycle of poverty. It's something very important that we have, that in the new history of humanity, education is one of the things that exists to help to go up socially, to rise socially, because education gives us power. And thank God, indeed, he did break the cycle of poverty. And his 3 children are highly educated. As I said, my 2 brothers went to the Nicaraguan American school. All 3 schools that we went to were bilingual. So I speak English since I was 11 years old. And this is a very important message that even the United States does not understand that bilingualism, that multilingualism is important and it is positive, and it should be welcomed, embraced. What we understand that a bit more because, for example, Guatemala with 27 different languages, that's very important here. Nicaragua has 7 languages, but it's very important that we open our minds to that. I want to tell you, I'm going to get to the professional part soon, but I would like to tell you when I was young, I used to see that my father, every day he used to wear a white shirt and black pants. And one day I asked my mom, Mom, why does Dad only wear black and white? And she said, so that nobody knows that he only has 2 shirts and 2 pants. No, but that was the truth. So imagine how a child feels, an 8 or 9-year-old, when they're told that, and and there's a big educational level. I had a great first class education. So I said, wow, if my parents sacrificed themselves so much, then I'm going to go study. And I did that. So, as they say in the US, I became a nerd. What that means, a very studious person. And I'm very proud of that, of having studied and progressed. And that really helped me in life. So when I graduated from university, and I graduated very young, of course, the first university I went to was the uh, Autonomous University of Nicaragua. Not UNAM, like they say in Mexico, UNAN. And that was a very beautiful experience. I had never had a public education experience, but I loved my education and my professors were very dedicated and I had a good experience. Although I did see that many of my uh, peers did not continue on in their studies, mostly for financial reasons. Once I graduated from university, I got married, I had a son. My husband is with me at this conference and the university since I was one of the best students who graduated. Remember, I was a nerd and I'm proud of that. They offered me a scholarship so that I could go wherever I wanted to. But, and they gave me a part time job at the university. So I was already a high school teacher. So when I was deciding what to study, I remember that my dad told me, he said, what are you going to study? And I said, I'm going to be a teacher. And I remember that my dad almost got a heart attack because he always, like many children whose children are first generation Americans, they always had the dream that their kids will be doctors, engineers, politicians, lawyers, all of that. And so I said to my dad, no, I want to be a teacher. And he said, but daughter, why? You're not going to make money in that. And I said, but dad, you said that I should study what I want to study. And he said, you're right. Because he said, if you study what you want, then you're going to be the best at that. I said, Dad, that's what you said to me? And he said, yeah, you're right. And he left me alone. And I continued studying. After that, when I was figuring out how to come to the United States, which is where I chose to come with my scholarship, the war in Nicaragua began. That is the second part, the other part of my life. It was a terrible civil war that has not been seen in other countries in Latin America. Not the same way, not to the same degree. It was an open war, like the one in Iraq, where there is a war from street to street, where there are bombs and you don't know where they're falling, like what we see in movies. 50,000 people died. Nicaragua had about 4 million people, barely. One of those people who died was my grandma and a cousin. A rocket fell on their house and killed them. The war was very difficult, and then something happened during that war. My husband was going to see uh, he was going to see a strike, a national strike, where I don't know if you've seen that, where the opposing parties do a strike to stop the economy. So my husband was going to take money out of the bank because whenever there are strikes, everything becomes very expensive, and then you have to buy it on the black market, and everything can cost so much more than the normal price, and it's very hard on us. And we both had cars. We were both professionals, and he decided not to drive his car because if they see him on the street, they may use the car as a barricade. So he decided to use the taxi, and unfortunately, many times guerrillas used taxis to do military operations. So they would go to banks and they would rob banks. So my husband, they thought he was a guerrilla member, and so they put him in jail for a week. We didn't know where he was. I thought he had disappeared. But when we finally decided on a Friday when he finally realized where he was, I was very happy. I said, okay, so he's not disappeared. some of our Latin American countries, the problem we have is that a lot of times people disappear and then they never come back. Then that was on Friday night, and Saturday morning I woke up very happy, and they had already attacked the place where my husband was being kept, and there were more than 200 people wounded. Excuse me, 200 people dead and many wounded. It was a very big military compound. So again, I start, and then on Sunday, my husband finally arrived, and he came with his face swollen and a broken rib because they had tortured him. So he finally got home, and that night we sat down to talk, and we said, you know what? If we remain here, we're gonna die. I said they're gonna kill us. So we decided to go immediately. I'm gonna go a little bit faster because the clock is ticking. I want to talk a little bit about the education I received in the United States and professionally the experience that I've had. I worked with high risk students. That means they're first generation students, first generation Americans. In other words, they're first generation, their parents have not gone to universities and they don't know what to do. Children of immigrants, and I've learned a lot in the process that I've had as a professional. And I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've learned. I had some slides from the United Nations and other organizations. I don't want to use them because I wanted you to see how all the governments in the world are investing in education. And it's very important that this education that we're investing is done well because the resources we're putting are too big to fail, especially in developing countries. Let me explain what I've learned as a paradigm. I've learned that we have to include students in the education process. And many times we treat students like an empty pot to fill with knowledge, but it's not that way. I've also learned that we don't include parents enough. And forgive me, but anything you do without including parents is going to fail because parents don't know how to orient or guide their kids, and we need to educate them, but in a good way, incorporate them so that they understand. And I'll give you an example. One time, a student that I was working with in my previous university, a very competitive university, and a boy came, a university student, and he was crying and he said, "Professor, my dad thinks that I need to work and I don't have enough hours in the day to work and study." And I called the dad and I said, your child needs to study and focus on that. The father had not heard that before. We needed to educate him. And the father thanked me. The man was in engineering, the young man. And you know what? He graduated. But without knowing it, his father was the biggest obstacle because he wanted him to be like his cousin who was in community college and he was working and to work full time and be a full time student at the same time. And a lot of times you can't do that depending on the university that the students go to. We also need to incorporate teachers. I've never heard anything in this conference on how we can include teachers. Excuse me, but many teachers don't want to be teachers anymore. And in the United States, in the university where I am, right now there are 30% less students who want to study in education. Why? Because many of them are abused. Everyone wants them to do this, and that, and they don't pay them well. And then when they're the ones who are educating future doctors, future teachers and engineers, and many times they can't pay for their own students, for their own children to go to universities. Teachers have to be incorporated in that process. And they have to be compensated better if we want to move forward. Parents, teachers, and another thing I've heard very little about is incorporating businesses, incorporating companies like Nestle yesterday and everything. In the United States, I have programs that I don't have enough money for, but they are 100% sponsored by companies. I do a conference and it's $45,000 for a day and a half, and businesses help me. How? Because we need to sell these ideas to them, and they have to be our associates in the progress of our state, of our country. They need to understand the value that this will bring to the countries, and then they'll start acting. So they have to be part of the solution. And the last thing I want to say is incorporating technology. Definitely, we cannot build enough schools. We cannot build enough buildings. We need to use technology so that to receive help, but we need to be careful how we do it. And one more thing that I want to say to you as well is that the systems of teaching systems that we have, and I am a graduate student in curriculums. Yes, we do have archaic systems. Students are no longer going to handle being sitting down for 2, 3, 4, 5 hours. And yesterday, hearing ourselves, who we talk a lot sometimes, I include myself there. I give classes at university, so how to do experiential things so that they can really practice what they learned. And education has to be relevant, relevant. So it's very important that we know that. I'm going to finish. John Dewey, someone spoke about him previously in this conference. He is a scientist in education who was very famous, and he said that if we are not careful, education is an organ of it reproduces, it reflects the status quo, and we cannot reflect the status quo. You know why? Because things change a lot, and we have to have an education that is dynamic, relevant, and that we can continue moving forward with it. And remembering that, just like language, everything changes, and the students we're having are changing as well. Let's not incorporate models. Let's not incorporate educational models. Let's create education models. It's important to see that what there is in our surroundings and to take ideas, and that's very different. To create ideas is different from replicating them. We are all very different, each one of us in our communities. Thank you so much for allowing me to give you this story, to share the story with you and share my experience with you. I wish I would have had more time. In 20 minutes we can't do much, but if anyone would like to contact me or anything, I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to CUMIPAZ, to Dr. Soto, and to all of those who are involved, to the thousands of volunteers, and to you for giving me 20 minutes of your time. Thank you very much.
Are reaching to the golden seal with Jose Inocente Moreno Cámbara. He is Vice Minister of Education in charge of the Vice Ministry of Design and Verification of Educational Quality, Guatemala. Moreno Cámbara worked as a teacher of elementary education and as a professor in the areas of mathematics, physics, statistics, computers, digital electronics, and sociology. He has been a teacher of mathematics, statistics, biostatistics, and physics in various universities in the country. He was president and representative of different educational organizations. He has been thesis advisor, speaker, lecturer, and moderator in various forums. He founded the program Youth Talents, Young Talents, sponsored by the Galileo University, Banco Uno, and the Ministry of Education. He was also the founder of the Research Institute of Earth Sciences, Sciences and Astronomy at Galileo University. Among academic degrees obtained are Teacher of Urban Primary Education, Middle School Teacher in Mathematics and Physics, Technician in Digital Electronics, University Technician in Optometry, Graduating Mathematics and Physics Education, Graduated in Optometry, Master in Astronomy, and Doctor in Astronomy. He also completed undergraduate studies in legal and social science and masters in astronomy and astrophysics. Eh, then we'll leave you with him. Well, very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you very much for giving us attention up to this time of the afternoon. I just in a CUMIPAZ, we don't do this. We don't leave a speaker like Adriana like this, a presentation like this. I want to congratulate Adriana. It's an extraordinary lection of life. I think they always ask us why we teach and why we learn. Well, exactly learn because not everyone has have all the capacities to work in the world, and those who learn, we have the obligation to do that they have a better world. That is the task of everyone that dedicate our lives to learn because that's a task. And then all those who work in teach. Welcome in the name of the people of Guatemala to all those guests. In name of the president, vice president, Mr. The Minister of Education, the vice ministers, and of the people, general people, to be here in this 188,000 square kilometers of greatest human warmth in our planet with a population so warm that we have the capacity that even when it's cold, we can warm up the weather. And that's where the name of the eternal spring is. That we have a lot of troubles, but that's for the climatic reason. They gave me a complicated topic, and I want to show it in a teaching topic. We are worried. They have cornered us in such a way that looks like it's an intermission of the personal area of the person. That looks like might be a sin because the child can be traumatic, and then we break that sphere of happiness because we are educating him. Oh, that's a crazy idea. Cannot be anything more wrong in an argument that in that. Those who dedicate to educate, we educate to make happier the students, not to take them away from happiness. And then just to show that subject, we're going to speak a little bit about those important subjects. But those teachers who are here, please do not go away from the teaching career because we also listen that not only in Guatemala are less teachers, it's happening in all the countries of the world. And then they need us because we are not only teachers, we are masters. And the only ones who have the capacity to go into that place where is the chip of the will of the person and take the change of will, very much needed, it's us. So we're going to conceptualize some things, please. We're going to conceptualize. I'm going to support in some slides. So well, we're going to conceptualize what is happiness. Generally, it is defined what the happiness is. We might have a wrong idea, and maybe we're wrong in that subject. Happiness, it is defined as a state of pleasant spiritual and physical satisfaction that is allow us as person to allow everything we need in choice of something good. This concept has been, if that is, we're going to align that after with some concepts of education, we will see that there's a high in relation to this topic. The problem is, if happiness is a concept very highly rooted in concepts like philosophy and psychology. Let's go historically to go through some phrases that express the different approaches that have been applied to happiness. For example, Buddha told us there is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path. Socrates told us the secret of happiness is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less. Aristotle told us happiness depends upon ourselves. Lao Tzu told us if you are depressed, you are living in the past. If you are anxious, you are living in the future. If you are at peace, you are living in the present. And then to finish, Ortega and Gasset told us happiness is life dedicated to occupations for which that individual feels a singular vocation. As you can see, all these philosophers align perfectly the concept of happiness to those objectives that after are going to see the main ones of the education, the pillars of education. And then, if we now have the concept of happiness, why it has been very incident lately? Well, it's just like in 2011, UTAN makes this suggestion to UN to do something about the topic of happiness, and then United Nations launches to be a primordial goal for the human being. And then things are get complicated a little bit. When they say that their goal should be measurable, then it starts the titanic task to measure how we are or how happy we are. Well, for example, the same Bhutan, he makes it in five different expressions. Having family and friends, or the capacity to so we can relate to our family and with society. Number two, to have good health and the means to keep it. Number three, to have the resources to live with dignity. Four, having freedom. And fifth, confidence in the transparency and justice of their institutions, whoever those are. Out of that measuring, well, there are some indexes that start the happiness is a statistic. Well, is the happiness of the index, the gross happiness index, and then the gross national happiness. How do we measure that? Well, traditionally, we do it through a questionnaire that has 180 questions and has 9 areas like culture, health, education, environmental diversity. Uh, then I have contact with society and also more aspects that shape how happy can I be. When we analyze those indexes and then we make a medition, a measuring, we find a pyramid that is aligned to those necessities of the human being. And then if you see the pyramid of Maslow, the Maslow pyramid, it's physiological physiology dimensions until the recognition and self-realization. It's a whole scale to see what the education perceives. That is the main thing that we educate people to be happy. There is need to request that. Yes, there is need. Attention to all friends of Latin America. Pay attention. We they have been insisting from the Middle East that all the smart ones live in Americas, in Latin America. We created everything. The cell phone, the automobile in series, the PC, the crystal telephone, the traffic lights, TV, the incandescent light, everything, everything. But if you buy an auto, you think in an Asian brand, and you buy a TV thinking in an Asian brand. And they told us if you invent all that, why do you buy to us? because we have an Achilles heel, the discipline, and they have been telling us that later or sooner the discipline overcomes the intelligence. And now we are a continent very, very smart, but with very low discipline. And that has brought us many problems within the educational context. And that's where they catalog as like not happy. Who are the countries with a better score? Well, I don't know if you know it, but I think yes, Finland. It looks like Denmark. I think he has some alignment with the results in the educational tests. Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland. Coincidence or not? You can think whatever you want. My obligation is to uh, pass this information that the statistics tell us. That we are in capacity to pass to the educational subject. We are not going to fall on the philosophical part because the educators, we have the bad habit to go to matching what is education when we should educate more. But sometimes we just get close into is this and such. We don't put too much attention to this. But let's see what do we have as indicators of educators. If I have all these troubles that Guatemala has, that Nicaragua has, the problems that Israel has in the educational system, I'm going to fall into the every one of us must have indicators in conceptualizations very particulars. But let's go to what UNESCO tells us, tells us about the educative part. Uh, Under the conceptuations of educations, the students tells us that they have to do some things so that they can have the capacity to adapt. So what is the best characteristic of every professional? I had a teacher, principal of a university. He tells me, you can be an expert in mathematics, but if I with 24 hours before. I'm telling you that you need to give me a 24 hours about Iliad. You can give me that. If not, strip the title of a teacher. And he makes us suffer. 24 hours before, he calls us to give us a topic that has nothing to do with the class that we need to cover. But we need to expose it because he has to go and listen to us. That capacity to adaptation may be achieved if we go these five types of learning. We have to learn to know. For any way that you want to know, we have to learn to know. And this time, to not learn to know, it's almost a sin. Because if we have the capacity to check Facebook, we have the capacity to consult any other source in the digital era. Pay attention. The idiotic is making damage to us. Do you know Latin America is the fastest media to expand a rumor, except that the rumor must be of science, except that the rumor be of science. If they say that Mars is going to be the size of Moon, everybody believes it and they spread it. That's not science. That is anti-science. I can say this cannot be achieved because Mars can be get out of the orbit and we should know that. But they have shaped us that our speed, that how fast we can spread a rumor is very high. So we can put some new, just put it in the media into Latin America people, and that's true thing we have to learn to do. It's an ability that we lost. Me, Jose Moreno, I am teacher. I keep studying, and I swear that I being perfectly good doing it in my life. I cannot repent of if I will born again, I will be teacher again and I will study again. How do they convince me? Well, my teachers convince me. Where we lost the way, if it's lost, I don't know. But it looks like it's true, is the most common of the senses. That is the sense. And that we start adopting strategies not to not very real, with the intention to personalize, to go deep, and to execute acknowledgement. But we have to learn to do. They teach me in the high school, they teach me to fix short circuits. They teach me to make plans. And my teacher was cruel, very cruel, but he made me extremely happy because I can fix things. Maybe we are confusing the concepts. Do not analyze a concept of, but analyze the continuity of states. Well, that is a part that is very hard to the us people from Latin America, even though they're making jokes about us that we are like crabs. That everyone that one goes up, we're trying to pull it back down. Things like that we have to learn to do. You have to be convinced of who you are. It's not coincidence that I live close to a star, G2, to hundreds of millions of kilometers, and you live in a habitable zone. You can be born in another one. You need to know who you are, and you have to learn to start and transform. If that is truth, then now, what do does UNESCO do so the education goes to everywhere? Have they put it in different lists of goals? And the last one is the objective number 4 of the objectives of development. We need to give education of quality, and then here it comes the quality education. What is it for UNESCO? Quality education, pertinence, relevance, efficiency, and then equity. That's for UNESCO. I'm going to show you what is it for Ministry of Education, please. For Ministry of Education in Guatemala, the educational quality, it's a concept that has to do with the social environment. It has to be dynamic. It has 5 dimensions: students, the environment, the content, the processes, and the results. All these perfectly aligned by 2 important actors that look like extinction species: the students and the teachers. If you make a correlation between what is to be happy and what is to have quality education, it looks like one is the tool to get in a sustainable way the other one. It has have a lot of excess, of course. Man is a pendular animal. He loves to be in the extremist and don't look for the just balance. He like to realize the idea of happiness, spending any of the other concepts, and he likes to radicalize the concept of education, killing the other concepts. And we must have a balance because we educate to be happy. We educate so our children be working in the with the best of the happiness. Is there any difference? I don't think so. Every time that I have the opportunity to greet a student, maybe it was a little asking for that, but I see out of realization that he has. Maybe he's failing about something that is not product of the education. He might have some other deficits that are not product of the education, but education still being the vehicle, the fastest vehicle and the certain most certain vehicle for the development. It's not matter to fill the brain. It's just to work with the brain and awaken the agent of change that we all have inside. If we fill the goals of quality education, well, we're going to keep being happiness. If we are happy, we get the realization of personal goals and national goals and worldwide goals. Do not stop studying. I invite the governments, the institutions, to the teachers and the parents that pay attention to what I'm going to say, and sometimes they're be converted in a big break for education. you see a video where it's a parody of how they fire a teacher because she scored in a bad way, that 2 plus 2 is 4, and the kid answers that the answer is 22, and they fire her because we radicalize too much the subject, that we don't allow ourselves to be taught, that we do not want to learn. This task is the best. We have to do it in the best way. Scenarios like CUMIPAZ, that they have different actuation spheres, and they give the importance to the educational system is for some reason. But this is not a responsibility that we can delegate to others. It's everyone's responsibility. And then we go to responsibility and education. You can be responsible of the things that you damaged. If you break a glass, or if you break a plate or the camera, you're responsible to pay for it. But where is the, if we learn through this educational system that we are responsible to even to those things that we are not guilty of. Maybe me as a teacher, I'm not guilty about the situation of every one of my students, but my responsibility is through education that he improve those conditions and be happy. Maybe he's not responsible of all the breakdown of Latin America, but it's my responsibility that through the education, every time we have a better Latin America. I invite you to keep teaching. Thank you for keeping paying attention, even though at this time after lunch. I am sure that the teachers being here do an excellent work, and I invite you to improve. In education is never a good. Is there is one why to improve. Thank you. Blessings. Welcome to Guatemala.
Everyone here is just making me very excited. That's the truth. But to summarize a bit what we've heard in these four important speeches, above all, they agreed in the importance of the student. We were speaking with Dr. Francisco Jimenez. He was speaking about human rights, obviously, but he was also speaking about the happiness of the human being. And in the end, that has to do with the student that is in our hands, trying to analyze the elements of peace and the different stages and possibilities of having peace, every different type of peace, and learning about that different types of peace, like neutral peace. That's very interesting. I have to learn to read a lot about that because it really is interesting to me. The analysis that he made with these elements of analyzing peace this way, in light of human rights, of course. And also the types of state management. We're always proud of our states, and we use nice elements in terms of our wording. Guatemala is referred to as the country of eternal spring, and so on, saying that we shouldn't over-exaggerate and that we should be realistic. And bringing to light the idea of having a conceptual map that that was proposed to us by the anthropologist here. Another interesting element we had here was from Dr. Santiago Castella about fear on both sides. On one hand, the initial fear of what was happening, of that ghost going around the world, and the ghost that was portrayed in different ways depending on what happens in the modern or old world. As grandparents say in the way that they managed the world, and they didn't know what else to do but what their parents did. They didn't know what else but to work in what they studied, but nowadays things work differently. and and fear comes from that we are too modernist and that we reach the wrong conclusions. But what that demands from us, specifically in terms of Spain, when there are where there is a lot of Muslim immigration, is that we try to educate the students and the public so that they understand that the sacred scriptures should not be used for terrorism, but on the contrary, values come from that. What what other values can we find in any other place except in any other place but the sacred scriptures? So we need to do that so that there is no fear, and we need to renew ourselves and in this way remain sane. And here we have Dr. Margarita from Nicaragua with her interesting journey, and which we want to know what's going to happen with those universities. And I wanted to work in the University of Martin Lutero, and they told me, please don't. I want to see which university I work in now. If anyone has an idea, please let me know. And again, she went back to the student. If there was anyone, if there was any topic here, it was about the student and how we should strengthen students, as Dr. Ariano said, and that's the most important thing, because from those students, peace will come or will not come from those students, because they will be the future leaders, and somehow they're going to reach presidency, Congress, different executive powers in countries. So it's in our hands to handle all of that. Though the word handle is terrible, but that's how it is, to work with that and to work with them in such a way that something good can come out of them. And what we just heard from Dr. Jose Cambara, the only one in this platform where we are who deals with or who works with the Ministry of Education. And he is the one in charge of everything that we do in Guatemala. And don't forget that I have 3 Guatemalan grandchildren, so I'm very interested in having a good relationship with this man. So we were talking about how he, in the end, begged us to continue being teachers, and that's the best that we can do, and that it's worth it. And what he's talking about in terms of it was relevant to happiness, obviously. Again, the element that there is no quality versus happiness, but one quality education versus happiness. One has to do directly with the other. They correlate. Look at what a good student I am. So we're talking about how, in order to be happy, we also have to have a quality education, and in the same way, we need to be good students and good professors, and then we'll be able to achieve everything we spoke about today. I want to end by thanking Dr. William Soto, Director General Lara. Please give him our greetings, send him our greetings. And we would also like to thank the panel and the patience that you had with us. And that will be all for today. Thank you very much.